Hello and welcome. This is the third in the series on ethical violations in the family courts by the forensic psychologist. This one is concerning Standard 9.01, the bases for assessment, and this is the one that's most relevant to the testimony in family court conflict and impeaching the testimony of the forensic psychologist. So the standard 9.01 of the APA Ethics Code, and a reminder, these are all mandatory, required ethical practices, not optional. So 9.01 says that psychologists base their opinions contained in their recommendations, reports, and diagnostic or evaluative statements, including forensic testimony, on information and techniques sufficient to substantiate their findings. And notice on this that they highlight, they include, they cite specifically to Standard 2.04, Bases for Scientific and Professional Judgments. That would be the information they are required to rely on, the DSM-5, attachment, family systems, the established knowledge of professional psychology. So Standard 9.01 requires that it be based on information, i.e. the established scientific and professional knowledge of the discipline, Standard 2.04, DSM-5, attachment, family systems, personality disorder, that domain of established knowledge, and techniques. And in this case, we're assessing for a possible persecutory delusion. The technique would be a mental status exam of thought and perception. So if they don't know or did not connect, did not administer a mental status exam of thought and perception, then they have not applied techniques sufficient to substantiate their findings, and they don't know the information, didn't apply the information, Standard 2.04, they are then in violation of both aspects of 9.01. So essentially what we have on these three ethical violations are a set of cascading violations from their fundamental violation to 2.01. They do not know the knowledge, and they are indolent in acquiring the knowledge. Then because they don't know the knowledge, they do not apply the knowledge, and that's the violation of 2.04. And then because they do not know or apply the knowledge, their opinions are not based on information and techniques sufficient to substantiate their findings, in violation of 9.01. And so the court should not rely on those opinions because they're not based on information techniques sufficient, and the psychologist involved is unethical. They're violated multiple ethical standards of the APA Ethics Code. The forensic psychologists in the family courts are in violation of three ethical standards where there should be zero. So with that, that's the description of the ethical violation to Standard 9.01. So 2.01, they don't know the knowledge. 2.04, they don't apply the knowledge. 9.01, their opinions are not based on information. Do they care? That's the next question for it. Do they care about ethical standards of practice? Do they care about being ignorant and incompetent? And another additional question, where are the licensing boards? Licensing boards are tasked with enforcing ethical violations. We're looking at three ethical violations from the forensic psychologists, pretty much universally. If you look at their vitas, you go to 2.01, you're going to be hard-pressed to find any forensic psychologist. In fact, you won't find any forensic psychologist who's competent in attachment or delusional thought disorders, right off the top, so they're not competent. And then you read their reports, they're not applying the established knowledge of the DSM-5 diagnostic system to their professional judgments, 2.04, or any attachment knowledge, or any family systems knowledge, or any knowledge about persecutory delusion, personality disorder. And so they're in violation of 2 ethical standards. And as a result, they're in violation of 9.01, 3 ethical standards. Where are the licensing boards? Nowhere to be seen. Why is that? And that's the follow-up of exposing how the mental health system in the family courts has been disabled. And the oversight functions for these forensic psychologists have been disabled. And that becomes an additional question as to how did that happen? And so with that, that's the issues surrounding 9.01 bases for assessment.